I grind for the love of the game. Passed up the sponsorship from Starry, Narc. We grind for the love of the game. ADP All Stars, searching for this year's Laurie, Mark. Oh, hi, Mark.
Oh, hi, Mark. Yeah, love that Starry reference. I mean, we need to get them as a sponsorship. We already have a title sponsorship at this point, but we could use. I mean, they're clearly throwing around money. They colored a whole NBA court tonight.
I watched tonight's festivities with my 83-year-old grandmother, and she was so confused. She was like, "What does this mean?" Like, I was like, "Oh, it's the latest attempt at corporate beverage to try to compete with Sprite, and it just never goes well." Remember Sierra Mist?
Sure, yeah. Sierra Mist seems bigger than Starry, but I think the best job in the world at the moment has got to be a marketing executive for Starry because they clearly are just they have is an open checkbook. Like
Yeah,
take what you need, like any idea is a good idea, like whatever you need.
they are not concerned. Anyways, this is not sponsored by Starry, folks. Welcome back to Projecting the Jump. We're obviously recording this right after All Star Saturday Night has ended. Nate, what would you say was the most iconic moment of 2024 All Star Saturday Night, sponsored by a made up soft drink?
Yeah, for me it was pretty night and day. It was that Sabrina Ionescu Curry 3-point competition. I think that's the coolest thing the NBA has done in so long. I have two daughters and they were so excited all
Nice.
day to watch that. We
Nice.
we we planned our day around it. They were geeking, jumping up and down. Watching Sabrina Ionescu go head to head with those guys was I thought was really neat, and she showed up too. I mean, she crushed it. She probably would have won the regular three
No
point
doubt.
competition.
It was so confusing because they were shooting at the beginning at the same basket, and I was like, "Why are they not keeping score?" And she wasn't making any shots, and I was like, "Because you're not used to seeing them warm up." So I was like, "This is a chaotic contest. I have no idea what's happening."
Yeah, she was bricking them in
Uh,
warm-ups and then just went on fire and once the thing got rolling. So that was pretty neat. I thought
of course, Steph Curry had to still win it. He had to put up the
he
highest
still
score of the
did.
night,
Yeah,
even though he wasn't competing in the actual shootout.
yeah,
Um,
he's the GOAT.
he really is. So tonight we're doing our ADP All Stars. It's our second annual. We did this last year. So what are ADP All Stars? For me, it's the best values of commonly drafted players. It's just ADP versus performance thus far. Nate, how'd you take it?
Yeah, I went the same way. It's in some ways this pod is the little bit more most cut and dry of as far as research go of all the podcasts that we do because there's actually numbers to support this. Where a lot of them, I mean, to be fair, we're making up all the topics, but sometimes they're a little bit hard to to put your hands around. In this case, it's pretty straightforward. Which guys, if you had a time machine, you could go back to draft day, would you take?
I'll get my hands around it. I like to take a moment and just reflect upon the beginning of our process. This All Star break is a time for reflection to kind of see what's happened so far. So just looking back at what we thought, gives us a chance to look at some of our takes. Take some victory laps and also look back and be like, wow, like didn't see this coming. And so just to kind of sharpen our process to just see like now we have a couple years running of doing this. So it's just a nice time to reflect and be like, okay, like this is what we expected to happen and here are some of the bigger surprises. So here are a couple notes I wanted to share. So if you go to Yahoo's page where it shows the ADP of the players and then it shows their rank, they have preseason ADP and then they have all draft ADP, and that includes drafts that happened after the season begun. So I used only preseason ADP. For instance, Jalen Johnson, he had a preseason ADP of 146, but his all draft ADP was 103. So I'm looking at preseason projections and how they worked out. I'm trying to avoid waiver wire hits. But I thought that was interesting. We got a lot of post season beginning drafts, and it really skewed some of the numbers.
Yeah, I would love to talk to somebody that does
Right.
a competitive 1/3 of the season draft through and see if that's fun or if that's not fun. I mean, it'd be kind of curious to try one of these years.
I've squeezed in some public league drafts that happened on opening day or the day after, just because of scheduling. But yeah, it really did skew some of the numbers. Another little thing to throw out is personally, I chose to disqualify. I'm doing East All Stars today. Nate's doing West, and we looked at both conferences, of course. But I'm going to disqualify Miles Bridges from this list. I don't want to glorify dude. I happily kamikaze dropped him in our league of record just to get some fab off the board. And personally, I feel like I'm good enough to win without his stench, but that's me. So, win at all costs and no judgment, but he did not make my squad.
Cheers to you there. Absolutely. Cheers on that one. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So, Nate, I will kick it to you. Now you got the West. So, how do you want to get us started?
Well, I'm going to get the uncomfortable part out of the way right off the bat.
Okay.
Yeah, I as everybody that's listened to this podcast knows, Jamie does not draft or roster anybody on the Oklahoma City Thunder, but they are currently crushing the league, and I've got to start there as far as my ADP All Star goes, and that's starting off with the number one player in fantasy, and that's SGA. And now it is a little hard because as far as of all the players we're going to mention tonight, I'm sure that SGA is the smallest jump from ADP to actual positioning, in that his ADP was 5.4, and he's the number one season ranked player as well as the number one per game player. But the differences, and maybe you have some statistics to back this up too, but the difference between like a 5 and 1 is a pretty massive jump. Actually, I remember, and I wish I could throw out credit to who uncovered this a few years ago, but it was when James Harden was really rolling and he was the number one player in fantasy. And they found that the difference between James Harden, number one, and the number two player in fantasy was equivalent to the number two player plus the number 20 player in the league. And so it's that jump from 5 to 4 is pretty large. Now, how's he doing it? He's he's giving you really good offensive numbers, but he's also leading the NBA in steals, and not just by a couple. He's averaging 22% more steals per game than the number two player in fantasy.
Did you crank that math?
I did. Yeah, I had to throw out the calculator on that one.
Nice.
Give you two guesses to guess who's number two in the league in steals.
I know this.
Yeah,
I do. I don't actually think I know this. De'Aaron Fox is definitely ticking up, but he's not number two.
De'Aaron Fox, number two. There you go. You didn't need two guesses. There we go.
Let's go. Appreciate that. That was a hedge guess. So thank you for letting it count.
Hey, nailed it. Yeah. So, I mean, on top of the elite steals numbers, he's also casually giving you 0.9 blocks, which is a lot more than a lot of starting centers in the league. I mean, that's more than DeAndre Ayton. It's more than Sabonis. It's more than Jokic. It's more than Karl Anthony Towns. And this all from the point guard position. On top of that, he has the most free throws made in the entire NBA, and he's shooting them at an 88% clip. Oof. So right off the bat, by rostering him, you're getting a massive advantage in two categories right there, and he's no slouch in everything else. So it's, coming into the season, I think there was a lot of talk over, he's just 25 years old. Does he, how comfortable did you really feel drafting him at 2 or 3? I think that conversation is in the books going forward.
And he is completely build proof. Even if you want to pivot mid-season, building around him, building around SGA does not pigeonhole you in any way.
Yeah, he's a point guard that shoots 55% from the field, and so there you go, right there.
I appreciate you starting it with the discussion of the fact that he had an ADP of 5, and right now he's ranked number 1. And that's really good research you did. And yeah, those incremental jumps up top are big. He just missed my top 5 in the West, so he didn't make my list. But I think that's a really important point as far as going from 5 to 1 is a big deal. But you definitely didn't whiff if you took some other guys up top either. It's not like that extreme, but yeah, very deserving.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I know preseason the most ink gets spilled on who's your first round pick going to be, and so it's nice sometimes in midseason to kind of go back and review some of that stuff as well.
No doubt. It's so as we tease this out, I noticed the West has a lot more firepower, and the East is a lot more like, wow, this was a big hit at ADP. Your team would definitely trample my team tomorrow if they were playing in the big game. But I'm going to start out with a guy that you actually mentioned before we got on, Tyrese Maxey. Got to start there. He had an ADP of 57. His season rank, then that's his totals, is 23. His average rank, which is the value of his averages per game, is 19. I want to note that his redraft ADP is prior to James Harden being traded away. We had an idea that he was going to be traded away, but we didn't know that Woj actually dropped at 2 a.m. Eastern on Halloween. So it's, it seemed likely at the time, but you have to think it did suppress his ADP a bit, but still. The breakout's been incredible. So looking into it a little bit, besides some of the raw numbers, he's been incredibly efficient this year. I was surprised just checking some of the advanced stats. He is 10th in the entire NBA in assist to turnover ratio, even though he's had this giant usage jump. And I watched him closely in college, and I thought he profiled as a microwave off the bench combo guard. And he's out there just playing efficiently. And so I've been really impressed with that. So the raw numbers are as follows: 25.7 points, 6.4 dimes, just under 4 rebounds. We're getting a steal, half a block, 85% from the line, 45% from the field, and 3 points, 3-pointers, getting 3 a game. So yeah, he's been incredible, and he's kind of the poster child of just getting great value. So I definitely wanted to start there.
Yeah, I think he had to be on any list. I mean, I think he's right in the conversation of ADP MVP. The one thing I have noticed since the Embiid injury, some of that efficiency is kind of, that shine has come off it a little bit. I figured you were going to talk about him, so I had spent about 30 seconds just checking out his post Embiid numbers, and because watching the games, I'd kind of noticed the turnovers have ticked up, they were incredibly low, as you mentioned. Now they're a little bit more in line with what you might expect. I know those turnovers jumped up from 2.3 or 1.7 to 2.3 since the injuries, and the assists have kind of fallen off as well. Do you think he's going to be kind of come back to where he was earlier in the season, or do you think these last couple weeks are a little bit more in line to what to expect from him rest of the season?
I want to point out with the turnovers, for me, as somebody who, if I win turnovers that week, I usually don't win the week. I just don't build my teams that way. So when a player's usage goes up and the turnovers go up, if that drops the ranking down, if anything, I see that as an opportunity to try to buy low on a high usage guy. I just don't care about the turnovers.
Yeah.
What's been wild is just the amounts of usage has been soaked up by Buddy Hield since he's come over. I mean, he is
true.
He's completely killing it. He's his assist numbers are through the roof. So I think that team's still kind of finding a balance. I mean, everything's going to kind of run through Maxey, but they have Tobias Harris. Paul Reed's really settled in. So hopefully the efficiency will come back up, and you're still going to keep. I mean, he's shooting 20 shots a game over the past 2 weeks. He's shooting 71% from the line the past 2 weeks and 85 on the season. So that's an indicator right there that he can come back up, because that feels fluky. He's not a 71% free throw shooter.
That's a strong point. Yeah. So moving on, you mentioned that the West is a little bit more top heavy star power. So it's not always I wasn't able to unearth a lot of uncovered gems here, but they all bear to be talked about. And so the next guy I got is actually somebody that we spent some time reviewing on our quarter season podcast. And at that time, he was number 23 in fantasy, this player. And I kind of wanted to bring him up because I figured it was one of the only chances that we would have to kind of celebrate this player's on the court performance. But clearly he stepped up to the next level. And that player is Kawhi Leonard.
Gotta be.
Yeah. Kawhi Leonard, he was number 27 ADP. I'm sure in leagues that were all over the board. I wouldn't have been surprised if you took him at 15. And I'm sure there was leagues where he was going at 50. I know he was closer to that in my personal draft. But on the season, he's the number 4 player in fantasy. And so really what's been more than anything has been amazing is because we've seen that in years past where he's been top 5, top 10 in per game averages, but then his totals are way down below. And this season, he's number 4 in totals and number 5 in per game. So he's played in 48 of the 53 possible games. He just is.
That's the key.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I mean, he's avoided getting nicked up. He's avoided the injury load management tag. So they seem to be kind of really going for it this season. How's he doing it? he's providing, really high end offensive skill sets at 24 points, 6 boards, 4 assists. But really, it's that defensive stats, just like SGA, where he's bringing it. He's number 4 in the league in steals, and he's also bringing 0.9 blocks. And he's doing all this with really elite percentages. And so what you're getting is about like probably a top 20, top 25 offensive player, and then also a top 5 defensive player, all in one package there. So a question that I have for you, Jamie, though, is on the season, I'm curious to hear your personal power rankings as far as confidence goes in the Clippers players, and so those being which players you have the most confidence in maintaining their current rankings or kind of raising their value, and that being Kawhi Leonard at number 4, James Harden at number 18, or Paul George at number 9.
Well, I gotta have Bones Highland number 1. Because he has nowhere to go but up. Before I answer that question, I wanted to toss this out too, because it's a theory question, because we're looking at our pre-draft process, and I know in our Yahoo Ranks examination podcast, when we did the too high and too low ADP, I think in general we were just a little afraid, and Harden wasn't a Clipper yet, but we were just a little afraid of Kawhi and Paul George. Paul George, who may be on this list, was my 3rd round too high ADP player, and that has not bared fruit. And Kawhi as well. How do you play when you are trying to make a decision on the clock, or auction league, snake, whatever, and you have to weigh this injury assessment against very, you have a lot of good players on the board, a lot of good players you could spend your fictitious capital on. What made this the year to trust Kawhi Leonard? And that's what I look back at the process, and it's like, yeah, I wish I would have. Is that playing scared to avoid Kawhi, or is that just going with options that you think are more safe because he just has such a lengthy injury history? And you see the guy in the league who spends $44 on Kawhi Leonard, and you think to yourself, I'm glad that's off the board. Am I wrong to say that?
That's exactly how I felt. And you kind of think if it hits, it's going to be a home run. But I guess the way that I like to draft teams is that I think that I want to at least leave the draft, like giving myself a chance in those later rounds, because I would hate to have it torpedoed with an injury so early. I think if I can just get my guys playing at average level, I can find enough guys on the waiver to kind of make up for some of that value.
Yeah.
But it's hard to make up for a 2nd round guy that gets injured right off the bat. So
Exactly.
kudos to everybody that took the swings. You clearly saw something that we didn't, and Eddie's putting together, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I just don't think they did see something we didn't. I think if you drafted Kawhi Leonard this season, you just got lucky. It's just like playing musical chairs, and you just ended up in the Kawhi chair the right season. And hats off to you. But I don't know if there was a stone that could have been unturned to predict this.
There is a certain point. I mean, where if he falls to a certain level, you think, all right, like this is the value is clearly there. And I do love drafting guys where if everybody else is playing scared, you at a certain point you got to take the swing, because if it hits, it's a home run. And maybe that's where he fell. And maybe, I guess, at an ADP of 27, maybe that was that point.
That's what I'm saying, is I still think that was the correct ADP with the information we had.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so with that in mind, I think if I'm ranking them at this point, you got Kawhi is the best player of the group, and I would put him number 1 as far as, comfort or safety rankings. Paul George and James Harden is kind of flip a coin. James Harden, you never know with that guy, what might distract him. Paul George, he's been trending down. I think he's worthy of he had an ADP of 31. The season rank is 10, but if you look his last 2 weeks, month, he's been trending down a bit. So I would have it Kawhi, Harden just by a beard hair over Paul George.
Lower beard or more mustache, or
it's all the same with him. It's all intertangled. There is no
strong point again.
Okay, so let's bounce back over to the East here. So this player had an ADP. I'm going to see if you can get this one, Nate. This player had an ADP of 87. His season rank is 30. His average rank is 33. And he is point guard, shooting guard eligible.
Let's see here. I'm going to go either DeMar DeRozan or Tyus Jones.
Tyus Jones make my cut. This is maximum Derek White.
Oh, Maximum Derek.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, he's crushing it.
It's, we both on this podcast, I think we've been long-standing fans of Maximum Derek. He's got a really well-rounded, fantasy-friendly game in any role that he has. But it was just hard to envision him taking this leap with a Celtics roster that got deeper over the summer.
Yeah,
You had Marcus Smart going out, Drew Holiday coming in, Porzingis coming in. I was still happy to take him. I got him 84th in a 9-cat league, and I got him 69th in my points league. We have 6 keepers on each roster already, so you have to envision what that would mean. So he was going after players like Punch Bob, Bobby Portis, Villain Brooks, and Casual Cam Johnson, just to name a few. So I thought I got a steal at the time, but I did not see third-round value in the cards. And yeah, I'd say he's been one of the biggest surprises. So I really combed into this one a little bit, Nate, to kind of see like what has changed. This one surprised me. He's had a rise in minutes. He played 28 minutes a game last season. This season, 32 minutes a game. He started all 51 games. So his minutes are up, and with that, we have increased volume. His 3-point volume is up. He is taking 2 more 3-pointers per game. He's making another 3 a game. So if your threes are up, if you're taking more and you're making more, that influences 3 categories. Obviously, your scoring, field goal percentage, because the efficiency's up and he's taking more shots, and the 3-pointers themselves. So that helps across the board. And just a slight bump in usage. He's up 20% from 18 last season, so that's not massive. But if you couple this with just doing everything more on the court, every single relevant statistical category has seen a jump this year for Derek White. And it's just been really fun. So just quickly, you're getting 16 points. You're getting 4 boards. You're getting just under 5 assists. You're getting a steal a game, 1.2 blocks. He shoots 89% from the free throw line at 2.3 attempts a game, 46% from the field. So he is like a super shredder glue guy, because you got him at a glue guy price, but he's, probably one of the best 5 players on your squad.
Yeah, it's, as you mentioned, we're both big fans of him. I have loved to draft him over the last couple of years, because you get that combination of threes and blocks at the guard position is so unique. But this season, though, I was disappointed with his ADP, because I felt like the story was out a little bit, where I feel like before you could get him with your last pick. Now you had to, at 80, you had to spend some real capital on him. And
I've heard you say that about other players. That's interesting. I think that's a part of your process. You're like, no, I used to get this guy dirt cheap. I'm not going to pay reasonable prices for him this season.
The McChicken used to be $1.
I know,
and I'm gonna be like damned if I'm gonna spend $1.75 or whatever it is, Bro, $2 on it.
If you want one hot and spicy, I had to get one the other day. I was starving after a drive. $3.50, dude.
$3.50.
Unless you want to get another one for $1, and I didn't want to. I didn't want one sitting in my glove box. No, although it would have held up. It would have held up for a long time.
I love DeAndre Melton, but that is who the McChicken is. Maybe the Derek White, but so I'm also surprised to see that jump up in value. It's amazing. It's really neat. He's a really likable guy. He looks a little bit like he was a character on The West Wing, but that's pretty great find there.
Character on The West Wing. Oh, and I never watched The West Wing. That one went over my head. He looks a little bit like a Smurf to me.
I can see it.
He's a cool guy. I will say what's funny, just ironically, a little my own league's corner, was I thought it was interesting. Although I love Derek White, I sold high in both leagues. In a 9-category league, I was able to package him and Yusuf Nurkic for Bam Adebayo. Win.
That seems great.
And then in a points league where I just you have to, it's a weekly league, you got to lock the lineups in, and you're just looking for guys who can average 40. I packaged him and Devin Vassell together and got Brandon Ingram. So that felt good, but that's just a little my league corner for you. But it turns out that people believe it. They believe in Derek White. That's what those trades show me. Yeah,
that's cool to see. I mean, that's a glue guy taking the next step, like you said.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that. So once again, I hate to make this awkward again, but I just I have to.
Did this player have an ADP of 48 and a season rank of 6, perhaps?
You've done your homework. I could tell. You've done your homework, and I have to talk about a rookie that's in the top 10, and that's Chet Holmgren.
A fake
That's
rookie.
it's
He's a fake rookie. He shouldn't be able to win the award. But the old Blake Griffin.
yeah, or Ben Simmons as well, for that
Yes,
matter.
good call. Yep.
But yeah, so I mean that's pretty insane. A rookie in the top 10 is wild. We in our preseason pod, you and I had mentioned that we were a little more bullish on him. If I knew you weren't going to draft him, but you liked his value higher than what his ADP was
I
of
advised he was a
48.
value. Yep. I can advise.
Yeah. Yeah, I had him at 32 in my ranking, so I was a little more bullish on him, but not number 8 bullish. So it's pretty wild to see what he's putting out there, and really what he's doing. Is another guy that we talked about in our quarter season review pod, and on that one, kind of dug into how he was doing it a little bit, and that was looking at his shooting tree. And so at the quarter season mark, 88% of his shots had come within 10 feet or beyond the 3-point line, and he was shooting 44% from 3-point line.
Jeez.
So we both talked about on that pod that we kind of assumed that the opposing coaches were going to find a way to push him out of his comfort zone a little bit, make him take some of these mid-range jumpers, and we'd kind of watch his efficiency drop a little bit and his rankings come a little bit more down to earth. He was still, you could tell the talent was there, but at this point now we're 60% of the way through the season. I went back and took a look. So of the shots that are basically at the rim or 3 points, it's the exact same number. It's 88%.
Wow.
The dude just doesn't take long twos. It doesn't take inefficient shots. And then you couple that with being number 4th in the league in blocks at 2.6 with 0.7 steals. It's, you're getting just a really efficient package of both offense and defense again. And so I think, I think the only takeaway I had from the only kind of micro knock, if you would, which isn't really even that, is that, I think that number 8 ranking to me is a little bit artificially inflated. I don't think he would make my top 10 rankings. I think he'd be a little bit more like mid to late teens. And the only reason I say that is that part of the reason his rankings is so high, and to be fair, he's tremendous, is that his turnovers are at 1.6. So if you're in a punt turnover build, or you're in a league that doesn't care about turnovers, that he becomes the 26th ranked player. So there is a little bit of a grain of salt to go with that. But overall, I mean, hell, if I told you a rookie was 26, much less number 8, you're going to be screaming value all day.
It's a really good point. Yeah, his average rank is 17, so it shaves that down just when you take it by the averages as well. Let me put you on the clock here, Nate. You need a big guy, and you like the value sitting there. Next year, would you take Bam Adebayo or Chet Holmgren with what you know now?
Well, I think I would go Chet.
Yeah.
Holmgren, Bam seems safer. There's a longer track record with him, but I feel like the impact on defense is much higher on the eye test than they are on the stats when it comes to Bam.
As far as for fantasy, he is one of the best. This is switchability. Unfortunately, switchability is not a category.
Right.
All right. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's tough. It's Bam's quite a bit safer, but I think I would, at that point, watching him kind of bang in the fact that he's looking remarkably durable, actually, as far as his games go. So I would take Chet.
As far as hideous white American centers, are you going Chet Holmgren or the great Robert Swift?
Okay, so it's ironic that you're bringing this up because my daughter is playing basketball this year. She's a kindergartner and she's very tall. Games she's the tallest kid on the court.
That's awesome. Where'd you get that?
I have no idea. I don't know. Who knows? Mailman, I guess. But today's game, she got matched up against this girl on the opposing team that was I swear was Greg Ostertag's kid. This kid was a good
Greg
8
Ostertag.
inches taller than any other kid that's been in the entire league. I swear it was like an 8th grader in this thing. So I think that's a long way to say. I think I would put Greg Ostertag in that ugly player discussion
Oof.
too.
Yeah. Did she have a buzz cut like Greg Ostertag? That's how you know. Bonnie Buckethead. I did not know she was down in the post. That's awesome.
Well, yeah. Well.
Okay, well that was Chet Holmgren. Yeah, we're a worthy cause for the ADP All Stars on the West Side. So we've again, I did look back at the ADP too high, too low, kind of as a reference point. And my next player was, I think we both had him too low. He was my 5th round too low player. He had an ADP of 50. He has a season rank of 11 and an average rank of 25. Any idea who this might be?
You know, I do. This is one Scotland Yard's Barnes.
It's got to be. You get the triple eligibility too. Shout out to that. You get shooting guard, small forward, power forward.
That's got to be a couple spots bump right there.
It's so pleasing. It just really reassures you. It only comes up every few weeks, but man, it feels good to see it. And so I'd written about Scotty Barnes that I think this might be his team in year 3. So I am quoting myself from our own podcast. So, but yeah, gone. You got Fred VanVleet out, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby. Maybe they sold a little late on some of those assets. And the first one I mentioned, they didn't sell, they let walk. But they've tore this thing down to the frame around Scotty Barnes finally. So he can still occasionally post a stinker. If you have him, you hear the season rank of 11, you're like, I don't know about that. But I think the 18 to 24 range feels right if we redrafted today, like at the very least. Shout out to me in a public league for getting him for $14 in an auction. But yeah, I think the perception was all over the map from him. But he just does. He's like a supercharged Derek White as far as you're getting 20 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 1.2 steals, 1.5 blocks, about 2 triples. He shoots 78% from the line, and that was a concern we had talking about him as his free throws they could be rough at times, but this season he's been more consistent. 47% from the field in 35 minutes. Just really he has to be in the contention for the MVP ADP discussion too, especially out here in the East where I'm hanging out. But shout out Scotland Barnes and shout out to anybody who was able to get him around his ADP of 50.
Yeah, that's just is elite. I mean, the fact that you're getting just such strong rebounding numbers from one of your lead guards in this case is tremendous. And I think it's been interesting to see. I mean, I think there was a little bit of concern there, and maybe that factored in with the ADP about what direction the team was going to be going and what that would look like. Because sometimes when you start stripping down the auxiliary players around them, then everything kind of falls apart a little bit because the passing numbers fall apart. So, you start getting more double teams, but that hasn't really been the case with Scotty Barnes, has it?
No. I think the Pascal Siakam concern for me, that wasn't a concern because of his price. I think for those who passed in the early 50s on Scotty Barnes, I think you should look at yourself a little more of a questioning eye than those that passed on Kawhi Leonard in the mid 20s, just because the opportunity cost of what Scotty Barnes could become and it flashed. That's why I'm looking for in that range, in the 50s range. He's definitely going to be one of my guys going forward. I always in my mind comp him to Penny Hardaway as far as the statistical profile if Penny would have stayed healthy as far as the ceiling, because he's that big league guard, rebounds the ball and can just kind of do a bit of anything. So anything and everything.
Yeah, I mean, and as you mentioned on the quarter season pod, what we didn't expect to see was those elite defensive numbers. And that actually has been fairly sticky this season. He's really made a huge improvement in those 2 categories.
That was lacking. I think it was like 0.8 and 0.7 last year. And you saw the outline of a player who could do this. But that's what we needed to get to this jump. So that's what you were betting on if you thought you were getting a steal, which you did.
Yeah. Well, nice. Well, moving back to the West, I mean, First off, we need to give a shout out to our sponsor, Star. Oh wait, no, Star is not a sponsor of the show, but the one who is Steelbridge Coffee. So anybody that's out there that looking for a beverage that's a little bit nicer than that lemon lime fluff that's being pushed around, check out steelbridgecoffee.com/PTJ. Got a bunch of really neat 92,000s vintage cards in prime condition. You get one of those for free anytime you buy 4 pounds, and that comes with free shipping. So you're going to be getting really premium coffee, locally roasted, fair trade, organic, and it gets delivered to your door for about 2 or 3 cents more per day than if you just went down to your local grocery store. So check out steelbridgecoffee.com/PTJ.
One
Now
day we
yeah.
might. I just gotta say, I'm envisioning a Steelbridge Coffee court like Star is tonight, though. Or do you think that's a little too lowbrow?
Well, no. I'm picturing that too. I think I was thinking maybe at least they could start with Steelbridge Coffee microphones and kind of behind us, so we could have the stats flashing with just kind of different coffee bean logos, and kind of step up from there. So start with the podcast sphere and then go to the All-Star game.
By the way, we got to get our koozies. We could sell them on Steelbridge Coffee's website, or perhaps.
That's a great idea. I'll give them a shout out right now.
Still got to send my Kobe Bryant rookie card I got last year out for grading. Speaking of mint cards, it is mint. It is cherry.
Yeah, that's got to be only increasing in value, I imagine.
I got it at a crazy deal, and then the next Kobe Bryant rookie that got put up on the website was at a more reasonable price. So I clicked that one quickly. It was a great deal. Really? Yeah. So nice. You can get some great deals too.
Nice. Yeah. Worth checking out. So the next Oklahoma City Thunder guy I need to talk. Oh wait, no, sorry. I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna go away. I'm gonna go away.
I'm actually gonna leave. I'm actually going to leave. You want to talk about Josh Giddey? Or you want to talk about Trey Mann? Actually, he would be the third best candidate for this list.
No, it's Isaiah Joe.
We will not talk about Isaiah Joe, the greatest stand-up practice shooter of all time.
Oh man, yes. I'm sorry. I'm ruining your night here. But actually, I do want to move on to a guy that's a little bit more in your wheelhouse and kind of get your take on this one. This, I think, would be kind of an interesting back and forth, because I'm a little bit unsure about this one here. So, and that's Keegan Murray of the Kings. So as far as the raw numbers go, his ADP was 105 on the season. He's the 55th ranked player. The way he's getting there is reasonable efficiency. He's really low turnovers. His solid threes at a little over 2 per game, boards a little over 5, 15 points, and with strong defensive numbers at 1.7 stocks. Now, my question to you in regards to Keegan Murray is what's more real? Is it really those first 35 games, 40 games of the season when he was comfortably in the top 50? Or is it more these last 15 or so games when he's been, frankly, kind of shithouse?
I'm kind of out on Keegan Murray as compared to public perception on him now. I just think that the idea of the player and the popularity of the player, it's just, if you were to do an all like perception is greater than what you're getting team, I think Keegan Murray would be on that for me. And I've been a Keegan Murray guy in the past. I want to give a shout out to Michael Fiddle of the Advantage podcast. We got into a debate on Twitter. He posted a question. Who would you take as far as just into the future, going to be the better player long-term, Jalen Johnson or Keegan Murray? And I was all about Jalen Johnson. I think he has star potential. I think Keegan Murray, the best case for him is the third option on a decent team, but the consistency isn't there. And I don't want to question his drive because I don't know him, but he just seems really comfortable with kind of kicking back. He doesn't seem to have that killer instinct. So I put a note in my phone that in a year's time, we're going to, one of our spaces, we're going to have a little debate and examine how that went. But I think Keegan Murray came out. When he's efficient and he has those spike games, those numbers can really boom because for the most part, it's kind of a mid experience. He's definitely a season long hold. But I think he has had sell high written all over him at different parts of the season. And if you're able to do that when he was really peaking, you're probably happy about that now.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of is a little bit of a prime Klay Thompson light profile to his game. And, I've been loving the fact that he gives you really nice, I mean, just that he's a really helpful, he's kind of an alpha glue guy of sense. But I have been wondering, and I've been waiting to see. I'm really curious to see after this All-Star break, and maybe we won't learn till later. Is what's happening in the last 2 weeks when he's been averaging 0.7 threes in 8 points and less, and not even one free throw attempts per game. Is this attributed to an injury? Is this just a slump? Is he hitting a sophomore wall? Or is he just going to kind of come back? He just needed a couple days off, and he's going to come back, and we're going to see this guy that helps every roster again. Because up until 2 weeks ago, he was a stone cold lock for me on this fantasy ADP All Stars. But now it's a little bit of I wanted to bring him up because I wasn't sure anymore.
To be clear, did he make your starting team? Is he in the top 5 for you?
There was like 15 guys that I wanted to talk about. I think if I had to actually say, if just not as far as content goes, he wouldn't make my top 5, but I thought he would be a little bit more interesting guy to talk about, especially when so much of the Western Conference roster were these top 10 guys.
You got jealous. You're like, you get to talk about all these kind of debatable guys, and I have to go through Kawhi and
That's exactly what happened. You've read me like a book here.
I was like, how has he come up before James Harden? But okay. But no, it is a good talking point. I will say that I have soured on him. He can really disappear within the flow of the offense. And I just think there's other guys who get hot and are more alpha when it comes to their approach to getting the ball and scoring, whether it be Malik Monk or Red Velvet when he's hot, Kevin Huerter. Harrison Barnes had a heck of a run there for a couple of weeks out of nowhere. So they just got a lot of auxiliary pieces who hunt their shot. And I think he's, as a second-year player, and seems like a fairly passive guy. I think he needs to exert himself a little bit more. I'm sure Kings fans would agree with me. I'm sure they'd love to see that.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. That's a good point. The best version of the Kings has him as their third best player, but a lot of times he's not even their fifth best player. 100%.
Now that Natron Clean has snuck in his more obscure, debatable player into the into the top 5, we'll get back to the Eastern Conference over here, and more of the same. It's another player who had an ADP, Nate, of 90, which was ridiculous. His season rank is 41 and his average rank is 42 because he's just so consistent that those things really match up nicely together. Any guess who this might be? I'll say that this player could be on this list in perpetuity. So is that how you say that? In perpetuity.
Yeah. Okay. Is this one DeMar DeRozan?
Nah, it's not DeMar. This is Tobias Harris.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why I said it that way. We might just want to rename. We might just want to rename this topic the Toby Harris All Stars because that would be fun. But so he seems to do this every year. Both of those ranks I just read you are obviously more than 50% lower than his sticker price, and he should really have been an auto pick once drafts reach the 60s. There's just always someone sexier. I get it. I've fallen for it too. But you know what's sexy? Toby Harris smashing his ADP year in and year out. So just golf clap to you, Tobias Harris, because every single year we want to throw you for dead. There's someone else we want to chase. Everyone just kind of yawns when you take him. Or sometimes at the end of our auction, I feel like someone gets Toby Harris for like $8 and everyone's like, great value. And then you look at the guy you overpaid for and you're like, that could have just been Toby Harris. But the numbers are beautiful. And he's had a spike in usage, obviously, without Joel Embiid. But even before that, I just feel like he was just more consistently giving you the ceiling Toby Harris games. So the season numbers, 17.7 points, 6 boards, 3.5 times, a steal, half a block, only 1.5 turnovers if you care about that. 1.2 threes, 90% from the line, 90 on 3.4 attempts, and over 50% from the field on 13.3 attempts. And then you just kind of lucked yourself into a higher usage jump here without Joel Embiid. He's, obviously contract-wise, he's not a superstar compared to what he's making, but he's just a steal every time. I just think he gets overlooked. And the East is kind of full of these guys. I have some more like that every year we just kind of want to roll over this guy. And then, we're laughing all the way to the bank after the season starts rolling out. And once again, Toby Harris is a top 50 player. What you got? Any Toby talk for us?
Yeah, I guess that it is interesting. I mean, he is like kind of this boring guy during the draft, and I feel like there's a subset of fantasy where if you told him that he was going to be ranked where he is in the upcoming season, they'd still go, I'll
Yeah,
still swing
I'm
on,
good.
I'll still
Right.
swing on somebody else.
That's
So like,
that's a really good point, actually. Yeah.
and maybe some of that is that it's hard to want to draft a guy that's the third best player on his team. I mean, you kind of think that there's a ceiling there,
Smart.
but it's all about a perceived. I mean, it's all a perceived ceiling, and and so in this case, he's constantly beating it, and it's really what's been interesting too is where we talked about Maxey having whether it's sticky or not, he's a little bit down since the Embiid injury. Tobias Harris has kind of stepped up his points production. He's kind of swallowed in a little bit more of that usage vacuum. And so I think that his play is only going to be getting stronger the rest of the season as well.
Yeah, as somebody who plays a lot of daily fantasy sports, in particular doing underdog drafts, he started going in the late first, early second round on some nights, just as a player with the highest ceiling that particular night. In that format, in the points league format, he's putting up 50 fantasy points on the regular. He's really, so if you look at it through that lens, yeah, he could be a top 35 rest of season player if we were drafted today.
Well, once we do our league where we redraft at game 60, then we'll do that next season and see how high he goes.
I keep missing that draft. Do you not invite me?
Yeah, it's a really busy time, around the All-Star break, and we're all too bored to want to do it.
Nobody wants me in that league. Okay, so now that we've done another mid-tier value guy who was a smash at ADP, who's your next MVP candidate?
It's funny because I didn't want to, once again, in the same story as Keegan Murray, I initially started to write this guy as my toughest cut, and I wanted to find a reason to talk about Alperen Şengün kind of smashing it, but instead, as I started to write up my toughest cut guy, I just kind of pivoted, and I thought, all right, well, now Şengün is the toughest cut, and I'm not bringing him up in this per se, and I'm going to be spending my time talking about Victor Wembanyama.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
And it was one of those things I didn't want to, because there's been so much ink spilled on him this season. It's a season of superlatives, and the numbers are pretty wild, but it just felt like it would have been criminal to not do it. And
so the 10 block triple double, we can start there against Scotty Barnes and the Raps.
It's nuts. It's nuts. There's the eye test and the stats test, and they're both crushing it.
Yeah.
So Victor Wembanyama, on top of the fact that he's averaging 21 points and 10 boards as a rookie, a true rookie, and 3 assists, is right there. That's like newsworthy. It's kind of he was always going to be the most interesting guy in any draft, because his ADP was 25 as a rookie, which was insane. And so he was the definition of a home run swing. And it was scary to do that in the second round. I was too scared to do it, even though I wanted to be that guy that did it. But kudos to everybody that did. There was a lot of reasons to think that he would do well. On the season, he's the 13th ranked player, but kind of by the end of this, I'm going to I kind of was doing this research, and I kind of thought, in my actual personal rankings, I would move him higher than 13. I think 13 is artificially low. In this case, in the exact opposite reason that Chet's was artificially high. So with Victor Wembanyama, you're getting 1.1 steals as well, and he's also leading the league in blocks at 3.2. And so, and he's not in much in the way the SGA was crushing steals, as Victor Wembanyama is crushing blocks. So he's averaging 12% more blocks than the number 2 player in the league. So I mean, and then obviously headlined by the game that you just referenced, the 10 block triple double game. And so the thing that when we talked about in preseason that we kind of wondered was San Antonio going to be extra careful with him, kind of have him in bubble wrap? It just hasn't been the case. He's played 49 out of 55 games.
Well,
And
the
so
minutes limit, we got to talk about that. What's insane about Wembanyama is he's been doing this in like 26 minutes a game, dude.
yes, you definitely I was absolutely going to talk about that too. It's absolutely bonkers. 28 minutes a night on the season. It's scary to think about what he's going to be doing when they unleash him at 32, 33 minutes per game. I mean, what is that even going to look like? The only blemish on his profile, if you want to call it that, which, I mean, as you just said, you're always doing a punt turnover build. You know, he has the fourth most turnovers in the entire league.
That's fine.
So if you're doing a punt turnover build, he jumps up to number 9. So to me, that's a little bit more where he actually sits. So
who would you rather have
question,
rest of the season, Wemby or Anthony Davis?
oh wow,
Yeah.
that's a great question. Man, that's tough. Probably Davis, I guess.
He's doing what Kawhi is doing as far as if you were playing musical chairs. So far you have him on the right season.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, that's like they're both elites, you know, and I think I just kind of have a slightly more confidence that he won't get shut down at the end. That would be the kind of the main reason there. But that's a really good question on that. I'm gonna toss it back to you with a less good question.
Yeah.
Is Victor Wembanyama already on your personal top 3 favorite Spurs of all time list?
Oh man, the Spurs have had some fun players over the years. Like Avery Johnson still ahead of him for me.
Up to him.
What about Vinny Del Negro, man? That guy was cool.
Oh yeah, going to old school with that. I like that. Yeah, big nose. I respect that.
In all seriousness, George Gervin is still my favorite Spur. I have a friend, shout out Spidey, listener of the podcast, whose favorite all-time player is Sean Elliott. He has like signed Sean Elliott memorabilia. I always found him to be kind of boring. Cool. Yeah. I was like, Sean Elliott, he's kind of like Reggie Miller without the platform. You ever heard? He does play-by-play commentary he does the color commentating for Spurs homes. Biggest homer I've ever heard. He's horrible. So anyways, to answer your wild question, probably, yeah, I guess so. I guess he sneaks in at number 3 behind Del Negro and in that point guard, Avery Johnson. That I'm sure Spurs Twitter is going to be like, who are these clowns? If you cut this out for like a minute and a half, Spurs fans would never listen to us again.
I would just like to know what percentage of people you say, all right, these 3 players, what was the question? And the question is, pick my favorite Spurs of all time.
Okay.
I assume that's why everybody came here was not to hear deep fantasy takes, was to hear personal Spurs pantheon.
Let me ask you the question that really matters here. Say it's preseason right now. Say the NBA season just ended. We have the information we have. We're going into a new season. Is Victor Wembanyama a first-round pick? Are you taking him in the tops? Like, how high are we going? He's high enough that I want a general range, a 2 to 3 pick range.
Yeah, that is going to be really interesting for next season. I think he's an absolute stone cold lock first round pick. He has to be. The defense, what we've seen on the defensive end, and the fact that he's doing this all with so little help. I mean, just the sheer amount of double teams he's getting, no point guard play, terrible spacing. He's in 28 minutes, as you referenced, that I just think that number 13 is the absolute floor that we will ever be getting him at ever again.
I think you start to consider him in a snake draft right around where you'd be looking at Jason Tatum. I think it's 7 to 9 range if you want him.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting because I'm sure next season there's going to be leagues where people draft him at 2 or 3, and there's going to be ones that he falls out of the first round, and it'll be kind of just his ADP is going to be all over the place.
I question my credibility that I'm in 5 fantasy leagues and I didn't get Wemby anywhere. It does. At times I sit up at night. Thinking about this. Why don't I have any Wembanyama shares? And who am I going to drop in our league of record to get Keontae George? Like these things keep me awake.
It feels less fun not having Wembanyama. I mean, it was the funnest thing to do on draft night, and it's the funnest thing to check. Yeah, I'm sure everybody that rostered him is having more fun than we are.
Speaking of fun, Licky, this is a perfect segue to get into my East Center because he's right up there with Wembanyama as far as fun factor. I mean, when you go into a draft room, you want to have fun, right? And if that's your main objective, Wembanyama's probably on your team and good for you. But also a player with an ADP of 69, season rank of 21, average rank of 31. I'd say he's number 2 in the fun power rankings, and that is Brook Lopez.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, that's just sexy. That's a sexy pick.
So sexy. I literally am wondering if this guy didn't look like such a dweeb, would he have gone in the mid 40s?
Gosh, or if how old is he too? Because in my mind, he's 38, 30, like 42, somewhere in there.
He's 35 years old, man. So
Okay,
he is
yeah.
pretty old, you know. But this is my kind of comp for him as far as analyzing the options we had on the table in pre-draft season. So what's really the difference between Brook Lopez and Miles Turner, who had an ADP of 37.5 compared to Brook Lopez's ADP of 69? Well, you get less blocks and triples for Miles Turner. That's the main difference. You're getting less blocks and less triples. Brook Lopez is, let me pull it up here. He's averaging 2.7 blocks. I think he's second in the league in blocks behind Wemby, and just under two threes a game. So those are, and we know he's a lead in those areas, but he just keeps doing it. And we kind of ignore it every season, you know, and the ADP is 69. So look at it like this. To be fair, Miles Turner does average 4 more points, 1.5 more boards. But if you're taking Miles Turner at 37.5, I did take him in the 4th round in one league. You could have had De'Aaron Fox, Chet Holmgren, DeMar DeRozan at pick 37, and then taken Lopez 30 plus picks later. So, you know, when you're kind of looking at how could this have played out for me as far as roster construction, players like Brook Lopez, knowing you have that in your back pocket as they get ignored, kind of as a general theory for having the East team. You have guys like that up and down, Tobias Harris, Derek White. These are players that if you know that their value is suppressed, and again, a lot of these guys, we didn't know they'd be this good, but you can bank on them being there at reasonable prices. So it's just an interesting way to kind of approach your risk assessment in the earlier rounds.
Yeah. Oh, that's really strong analysis on that one. It's I feel like you're kind of coming across a theme here of just like you have to take the value. I love kind of that comparison with Wembanyama in that you know, not every pick needs to be you leave the draft and people are buzzing about your pick and your thing, because I feel like a lot of times the guy who wins the league isn't the person the day after the draft that you go, dang, you got all the sleepers. It's just that you nailed solid value.
Like not every pick is so exciting that your buddies are going to text your mom.
I think that, like, so the year that I won our joint league, I remember, and sorry, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here. I remember getting a text from you after the draft saying, like, a text that said, "Damn, that's not much upside there."
Yes, that was the ultimate Licky build.
Yeah, it was just boring. It was just like a lot of like, all right, like 7 spots better, 7 spots of value here and there. And Brook Lopez is definitely that. And I mean, even I was a little too bored to take him this draft. And I love those type of guys.
Yeah, I mean, eventually ignoring Brook Lopez will be viable, but I'm not going to ignore him again in the 70 range until he falls off.
Yeah, in like,
no, I probably will. I probably
like
will ignore him. I probably will ignore him, actually. Sorry about that.
No. Yeah. But in non-fantasy talk, like in real life, when you watch the games, and I feel like that's going to be a question for the Bucks going forward, is that so much of their like end of game plays are built around this like need for Brook Lopez to be this release valve, and they put a lot of pressure on him to be this. I mean, like, so much of the offense is kind of is planned around him, and so I wonder how sustainable that is. There's so many times where Dame gets double teamed. They took away Giannis, and they're throwing to Brook Lopez late in the shot clock to kind of hoist up a 3, and I just
Yeah.
don't know how sustainable that is as
I
far
mean,
as winning in the playoffs goes.
their supporting cast, in particular, the guys after their top 5 or so guys, is historically bad. I don't know why they thought that the Bucks could get away with that, man. Like the young guys they have, like Beauchamp, they're not willing to play him yet. They don't have any trust in. There's no one waiting in the wings to soak up. I think they signed Gallinari in the last couple days,
Yep.
and that's not going to do the
I like
trick.
Andre Jackson a little bit from UConn.
He's all right. Yeah, yeah.
It's okay.
But man, I mean, they're just really depleted of guys who can step in to fill voids. And it seems like Bobby Portis has taken a step back this year as far as what he's able to do off the bench. He's just kind of lost a step. So yeah, real concerns out in Milwaukee when my G League Memphis Grizzlies were able to take them to task leading into the All-Star break, and Doc Rivers is making excuses talking about some of these guys are ready for Cabo. I'm like, okay. Like
that's All-Star Eastern Conference coach.
Yeah.
Doc Rivers.
I actually wanted to get into looking at some of the pre-draft talk we had on Doc Rivers as far as coach of this team, coach of the year. And that's depressing. I wouldn't have taken these Eastern Conference if I knew you were going to bring that up.
Yeah.
So there are some guys on the West list left that I'm curious if you're going to get to. So who do you got?
Well, yeah, so the last little category I got is don't really want to do a deep dive on these, just kind of 3 guys that kind of fit into the same conversation, and so kind of just going to do some quick hits on them, and feel free to jump in if you have something that you want to talk about with either one of these guys. Otherwise, I'll just breeze through them. The first, and so I'm calling this the undrafted Western Conference All-Stars, so guys that didn't go drafted in your league, in most leagues, but are now squarely on everybody's rosters at this point. So the first is Grayson Allen, whose ADP was 140, and he's currently 56 in season rankings. He's been falling off a little bit, as the Suns roster gets fully healthy, but the question with that is how much confidence does anybody have in the Suns staying healthy the rest of the way? I think, both Beal, KD, and Booker, I could see them all missing time here or there. So I think he's going to hold his value at this point.
Well, original glue guy Rolls Royce O'Neal is in town now, so Grayson can step down.
That's true. That is, and he's been playing great on that too. So I think you'll probably see a dip in Grayson Allen in the short term, but don't drop him if you have.
Yeah, I would. He's definitely a good candidate for our last drop All Stars list that we're talking about doing. Players that if you need to make a cut on a Sunday, who are the guys that are just like it would hurt you to make the cut, but you're still willing to make it? I feel like he's trending towards that direction as we inch towards the playoffs. If you really need a win, but no, I think you would prefer not to drop him. Yeah,
good point. The next guy being, as far as kind of breaking the rankings, is Colin Sexton, your boy.
My boy that I traded in every league I had him.
Oh boy, yeah. His ADP was 130, and he's surprisingly season rankings is 71, which is the only reason I say that's surprising is that he didn't really get that much run or that much usage in the early part of the season. So he really did most of his damage over the last 2 months. And so it'll be interesting to see how, you referenced Keontae George, kind of to see what impact the Keontae George getting moved into the starting lineup will have on his usage and overall minutes. But at least, it's since December 1st, he's been kind of that stud. So prior to December 1st, he was averaging 11.9 points per game. Since December 1st, he's averaging 21 points. So he's really, really kind of making some waves here at the end.
Yeah, man. Even though Keontae George is now the starting point guard, and he had 9 3-pointers against the Warriors the other night, Sexton still had 35 points in that game. So I think this is more of a Jordan Clarkson statement. Somebody's got to lose out, but it looks like it's not going to be those two.
Yeah, that's a good point. Last guy I got is, somebody that I love the opportunity to be able to bring up, as you probably would not be surprised about, and that is Mike Conley.
Oh, cool. Nice. I thought you were going to say Villain Brooks. I was like, nah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, damn. All right. Hit the pause button. I got to do a little bit of research here real quick.
I don't know how to pause.
So Mike Conley was 128 ADP, and he's currently ranked 52. I kind of assume that ADP reflected people's perceived lack of upside. And at first glance, his box score numbers kind of confirm that. He's averaging 10.5 points, 3 rebounds, 6.5 assists. But what's really driving his high ranking at the moment is that he is number 2 in the league in assisted turnover ratio. And you care to guess anybody? See if you can guess number 1 or anybody that's kind of up in the top 3 or 4.
Well, I just looked the other day to research maximum
you did?
intent,
Okay.
and I still don't remember. Isn't Halliburton pretty high up there?
Halliburton is. He's the only interesting player that's up there. The rest
Yeah, just kind of a random list.
it's just all boring guys.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, Tyus Jones is 1.
Yes, he is. Yep.
Chris Paul is 3. Fred Vliet is 4.
So there's someone in
Sam Merrill Perrell is 5.
Yeah, I was going to say there's some names in there that kind of lend on to the assist turnover ratio being a bit of a dated stat. You're just kind of like, how are you hanging out in there? Conley averaging 92.3% from the free throw line doesn't hurt. That'll help a little.
Yeah, number 2 in the league in free throw percentage. But I think based off of those 2 things, and this pains me to say this, and I think it does hurt. I would say that based on his ranking at 52, I would throw him out in some trades, see if you can get some good value back for that. Not that you need to trade him, but I think if somebody sees 52, especially if he has a good game and he gets up to 49, you can say, oh, I can give you a top 50 guy. For anybody that is giving you a little bit more volume, it's worth exploring.
I mean, if you're not willing to trade for him, I don't know who would be though.
Yeah,
you're like his fair. Number 1 supporter. Yeah, no, that's a good point. So I gotta hold your feet to the fire here. Before I do that, I am gonna roll out my 6-man on the East ADP All Star squad. I did do a 6-man. This is more of a looking into recent production and also rest of season. ADP of 132, a season rank of 108, average rank of 118, but the last month this player is the 29th ranked player. So if you drafted him and you held, I salute you. I drafted him in one league and dropped him after many months right before the breakout. And then in another league, I drafted and traded him. Any guesses who this Eastern Conference swingman is?
Is this the Jalen Johnson one?
It's not. It's Brandon Miller.
Brandon Miller.
And the reason I went with Brandon Miller is because he did have an ADP of 132, which was just enough. See, like players like Jalen Johnson, that was a cool little rundown you did, and I could do that with the East as well. Jalen Johnson had a preseason ADP of 146, and to me that wasn't enough leagues to quite make the cut on the team. But this is kind of just with an eye for the future. I think the rest of the season, you could be looking at a top 50 guy here. He's better than I thought in many facets. For one, his scoring versatility and his willingness to kind of be a vocal leader. I've seen some clips of the Hornets games and tuning in here and there, and he really is feeling comfortable to step up and kind of lead this team. And I think you could really see some fruits on the Brandon Miller tree for the rest of the season. On the year, 16.6 points, 4.1 boards, 2.3 assists. Stocks are 0.8 on steals, 0.6 on blocks, 2.3 threes. But if you do the handy dandy last 14 days, jumps up to 23 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.3 steals, a block, and 3.1 threes. Now and again, I was actually negotiating in one of my leagues with the guy who picked him up when I dropped him. And I let him know I think this is probably his high watermark for the season, and I'm not going to be buying in on that. So I think there was an incredible sell high opportunity when he was peaking. But yeah, I just wanted to give him a shout out as a player that was he was a flyer. He was a great late round flyer, and if you held long enough, that's really paying off.
Yeah, and I think Charlotte has they do have the need, and I think they want to see if this guy can be the number 1 player on an offense. I think there were some questions about that coming in. I think a lot of people kind of thought he might be best as a kind of a strong number 2 type player, kind of a space and kind of a prime 3 and D. But so far, the profile, at least over the last 2 weeks, has kind of shown a number one player.
Totally. Yeah. So that's been encouraging if you're a Hornets fan. You know, if you're a Blazers fan and you were mocking the Hornets for taking Brandon Miller, that's not aging great. Not aging great.
Nope. It isn't. Yeah, it is. It's funny too, though. You're mentioning that Jalen Johnson didn't make it because he wasn't drafted in a high enough ADP. I mean, it's funny just with the name Jalen Johnson. I mean, he was the third Johnson drafted. He was the fifth Jalen Johnson drafted. So
He's the fifth Jalen.
He was the fifth Jalen. Yeah. So he couldn't even get any respect with his own name. I mean, you Yahoo him, and like you had to scroll to get to him. So
I saw Jalen Rose go ahead of Jalen Johnson in a draft this past year. So that was crazy. Okay, so just get real quick. Let's get back to it. I did have a top 5 in the West. Kawhi and Chet Holmgren were very clear for me. Why no love for Paul George on this list?
It was really that I thought that all three of those Clippers kind of should be included in it. Really, the guy who I might have talked about more would have been James Harden, because I think because there was so much uncertainty on him on draft day that I think his ADP was was low, but I think in a lot of leagues he was getting drafted like in the 40s or so. So the fact that he's come in and looked like 90% of prime, maybe not 90%, but 85% of prime Harden, was somebody that I think all three of them could have been talked about, but I didn't want to go 100% a Thunder podcast on my end. I didn't want to do 100% Clippers pod.
That's fair. So I had Paul George making it. I had James Harden making it. And again, I didn't spend a whole lot of time on the West. And I had Anthony Davis for a similar reason that you gave on Shea. He had an ADP of 13, but the season rank is 3 and his average rank is 4. And I thought that was incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I mean, he's been absolutely crushing it. And I think it was interesting because in our league, there was the guy who drafted him clearly took value drafting him. And then he was the number one player in the league at the time, and he was fishing him out there in trades.
Yeah.
And you could tell the mindset was, like a sell high at this point. And everybody was too afraid to take that sell high.
I never got an offer, Matthew Boucher.
Oh, come on, Matt. I got an offer, but eventually he did trade. But it's hard to take those guys because even when they hit, you can't trade them per se because they kind of have a salvage title in a sense.
Salvage title is a great way to put. Salvage title All Stars. I was on the receiving end of one of those Anthony Davis sell high moments a couple years ago when I had him for a glorious 2-week run where he was the number one player and then he promptly got hurt again, was out for the rest of the season. So I've felt that pain before, and again I think it's a reasonable person could say, hey, I'm glad you're enjoying Anthony Davis, but I don't want to live that way.
Yeah.
I
hear you. Yeah, the only guys that I had jotted down as far as East guys that you didn't talk about was Bogdanovich from Atlanta, whose rankings seemed artificially inflated. I know you texted about him right beforehand, but I had him written down. I don't know if you considered him or not.
No.
Yeah, good. The other one was the other category of players was a Chicago Bulls in general.
DeRozan, Kobe White, even Vooch. That's fair.
I was afraid to draft them all. I just assumed that they would be kind of sold off. They would get old and break down. And once again, they didn't, and they kind of continue to give surplus value.
Yeah, Kobe White fell into the Jalen Johnson bucket of that's not how I was analyzing this. For me, he's more of a waiver wire of the year candidate. But DeMar DeRozan, he is the 24th ranked player with an ADP of 46.7. He deserves a shout out for sure. And he easily could have made this team. I just left DeMar DeRozan off the team. You know why? Because he's boring. Just like the rest of my team.
We've already got Toby Harris stock.
He would have fit in. Yeah. I went for exciting guys, as you can tell. Okay. So this is a
real flip for us. This is a real change.
This was a real growth opportunity. Honestly, this is strange, but just a review for the listeners, maybe fast forward to the very end of this podcast. So My ADP All Stars on the Eastern Conference. I had Tyrese Maxey as the point guard, Maximum Derek White as your shooting guard. My small forward was Scotty Bonds, power forward Toby Harris, and center Brooke Lopez. I mean, the numbers bared it out. And I gave Brandon Miller the 6-man nod just over DeMar DeRozan. So that's the East squad.
Nice. Yeah, West squad being Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. Then we go to Kawhi Leonard, followed by Chet and Wembanyama. And the talking points, we're gonna go with Keegan Murray. But if I was being
No,
serious,
keep him.
probably Then if we were being serious, I would go Harden. But we're going Keegan Murray.
So Nate and I, we've referenced this before. One of our favorite pastimes when we get together is to wait till a little after midnight. We've had a couple drinks, and we do a 2K fantasy draft. We draft the entire league. I would literally churn off the Xbox if this is the squad I ended up with and you had your squad. I would not play it out. I just couldn't. So that's a very interesting exercise. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Like I said, I think it's a fun time to reflect, look back at some of the choices we could have made. Hopefully it helps your process into the future, but it's just also another way to jump into the All-Star festivities and just, have a good time with this and just have some fun. So Nate, got any burning thoughts before I do the plugs?
No, this was a fun exercise, and it's a nice thing to kind of have a little bit of a break here from fantasy before we jump back into it. So and here we come to the stretch run. So
there's no rest for the wicked. I mean, I'm doing a baseball best ball drafts. I'm hopping into some hockey. Did a golf the other night.
Wow.
I'm just kidding.
I'm impressed.
I'll get there. This will be the last pod that we record from Pat's Place Studio and Gallery. So please, if you're ever in Goldendale, Washington, it's right on Main Street. Beautiful collection of artwork, fun little earrings and knickknacks and pillows. But I just want to thank you, Pat. I know you don't listen to the podcast. You're like 80 years old, but I really appreciate you opening up your space to me and giving me the code to your business and let me hang out with your cat, Emily. It's been awesome. So thank you. And maybe I'll send this little clip to you. But please do remember to follow Projecting the Jump and all the spaces that we're out on Twitter, please. You will find us at Projecting the Jump Pod. You'll find Flyin J on Twitter as well. The YouTube videos are a fun way to engage with that, so hop over there. If you type in Flyin J Fantasy, you'll find the channel. Throwing on some stuff on there, doing little 5-minute clips and stuff like that. And check out Winslow Guitars as well. Another one of our lovely sponsors. If you're interested in some custom guitars or kazoos. Actually saw Ryan last weekend. His band played a show in Portland, and I verified. I was like, are the kazoos a part of the discount? He said yes. Anything on the website, if they use the PTJ10 promo, is discounted.
Beautiful. Those none of your friends have a custom wood kazoo, so you'll be the first.
Amen. Yep. We'll cut amen from the end. Anyways, for your boy Natron Clean, this is Flyin J. I had way too much Coke. Had some relatives over, was up late last night, and I have drinking a 2-liter of Coke. So enjoy the rest of All Star.
Other type of Coke.
Yeah, Coca-Cola Classic. Yeah. Another soft drink if you want to sponsor us. But enjoy the All Star game tomorrow, folks.
All right, later.